Hey, welcome to our story time this week, remote learners. I am here with my friend Tracy. She is a professor at K-State, and she's going to share some poetry with us. Tracy, what got you started in poetry?
I had a lot of feelings when I was younger. So I wrote poems from the time I was very, very little. I wrote poems as a kid. And even when I turned 13, my gift was a typewriter. Those are really, really old kind of computers. But that was
Tracy,
like my gift way back then.
we share
We,
that in
we,
common. Did you know
we
once I got
do?
a typewriter as a Christmas gift when I was in school? Like that was the thing I wanted for Christmas. It was under the tree. I remember seeing it. So we have that in common. So that's pretty
Your
cool.
family
So
was very
tell me about the
cool.
background of your image here. What does poetry have to do with emotions?
Well, right now I am standing live inside the movie Inside Out, right where the control panel is. Where in the movie the five main emotions like are running the inside of Riley's head, and all memories show up in different colors. And so one of the things I really love about the movie too is how important sadness is. And I like happy poems and I like silly poems, but I also think sometimes it's important that we talk about sad things or hard things, in addition to all the fun good parts that are easier to share. So that's like too at the dinner table. I like to ask my son Elliot, who's in Mrs. Dempsey's first grade class, what was the best part of his day, and did anything happen that made him sad or angry that he wants to talk about, right? Because it's good to talk about the joy stuff, but it's also good to like have an adult that you trust that you can talk to about like those difficult things. And if you don't feel like you can tell an adult, you can also tell a poem. And sometimes that was why I liked to write poems, is because I felt sad or angry, or I had a feeling that I kind of wanted to get out. And I thought poems were a great way to do that.
That is beautiful. That is a perfect segue. Is it okay if we read two poems together? The first one kind of connects to some of that sadness, perhaps, that might be there. This is a poem called Since Hannah Moved Away. Would you share this one with us, Tracy?
Yes, I would love to. Since Hannah moved away, the tires on my bike are flat. The sky is grouchy gray. At least it sure feels like that since Hannah moved away. Chocolate ice cream tastes like prunes. December's come to stay. They've taken back the Mays and Junes since Hannah moved away. Flowers smell like halibut. Velvet feels like hay. Every handsome dog's a mutt since Hannah moved away. Nothing's fun to laugh about. Nothing's fun to play. They call me, but I won't come out since Hannah moved away.
Yeah, some deep emotions. I love the rhyming pattern of this poem, but also the content of what this is sharing. Judith is the author, the poet here. She was born in New Jersey, and she's written all kinds of work. This is a site called poets.org. It's where we're going to get both of our poems today, but you can sign up to get a poem a day. Tracy, what does this poem's themes kind of connect to? If we were to do a close reading and connect this text to ourselves, what are some things or themes that you would maybe pick out from this one?
Well, I mean, it's a poem that's about saying goodbye. And I thought it was like a poem that maybe students would connect with quite a bit, because we can't see our friends as much right now with coronavirus. And that's really hard. That's a hard thing, to not be able to see and talk to our friends as much. Um, and so I thought this poem, though it's about somebody moving away rather than, quarantining from a virus, but I thought it was a really interesting connection, that it's about missing someone. It's about a little bit of loneliness and how that kind of changes the way we see things, right? So the sky, maybe the sky's like silvery gray or a pleasant gray or a balmy gray, but for the person in the poem, the sky is grouchy gray because they don't feel good. So everything that they see when they look around, that looks grouchy. And the ice cream tastes like prunes. Who wants prune ice cream? Not me.
Nobody.
And just everything. Your flowers, halibut is like a really stinky fish. Who wants to smell a stinky fish when you're smelling a flower? But it's just that everything, even velvet, feels like hay. So I really love too that we get a smell and we get a touch and we get the way things look. So we're getting all of our different senses involved in the poem too, that just everything is really stinky and awful without a friend. And so I thought this would be a really good one, thematically, with that sort of loneliness and missing friends. But I think it's also such a great poem for all of those really great details in the poem, and that how we get all of our senses involved in this missing of a friend.
Beautiful. That was a great one. Are you ready for more of maybe a silly one now? This is a
Yes.
poem that's called Be Glad Your Nose is on Your Face. This is by a guy named Jack Perlonsky, and he's written all kinds of poetry. Would you mind reading this one for us too, Tracy?
I would love to.
Thanks.
Be glad your nose is on your face, not pasted on some other place. For if it were, where it is not, you might dislike your nose a lot. Imagine if your precious nose were sandwiched in between your toes. That clearly would not be a treat if you were forced to smell your feet. Your nose would be a source of dread were it attached atop your head. It soon would drive you to despair, forever tickled by your hair. Within your ear, your nose would be an absolute catastrophe. For when you were obliged to sneeze, your brain would rattle from the breeze. Your nose instead, through thick and thin, remains between your eyes and chin, not pasted on some other place. Be glad your nose is on your face.
This one cracked me up. I'm so glad you shared this one with us. What themes of joy and silliness does this one bring up?
Well, I think speaking of like the current time we're going through, I think I've been focused on gratitude a lot. In fact, I make my students in college change their names in class to the last things they were grateful for. So the last thing that brought them joy. And I think we all need something of joy, and we need to focus on those things and remember those things. And sometimes it can just be something silly or small that brought you delight. And I just really love that you can be really happy about your body and where your body parts are. Like, thank goodness your nose isn't stuck between your toes. So I think it's just totally ridiculous. And I love it too, because especially having a first grader, it's these kinds of silly things and silly physical humor. We'll be watching so much Home Alone and Home Alone 2 on repeat just to watch silly things happen to people this winter. So I just think it's really funny that it's just absurd, and the comedy is so physical in the poem as well. So I think it's really funny to think about, like, well, what would happen if your eyeballs were in your armpits? Or then you can play that sort of game with your parents of like, well, what would happen, if your fingers were on the back of your neck? Or what would happen if like different body parts were in the wrong places? And what would that do to your day? Then you would need a glove and a scarf, or do you just double up on the scarf and it's fine? I don't know.
So many options.
I
You've
know.
given us so many ideas for our weekly poetry challenge, Tracy. Students, we hope that by Monday at 12:30, you have been able to share a poem. There's so many good ideas that are already posted here, but we can't wait to see all the creative things that you shared. Tracy, any other final thoughts on why poetry is so important?
Well, my son Elliot told me his definition for a poem was that it wasn't a fact, but it was true. So I really like that, even though he's learning really cool facts about the moon right now and science, other cool things that are facts that are nonfiction, that a poem is still true. And I think our feelings are usually a pretty true thing and worth listening to. So I think that that's like a really great reason to write, is find out what's true in your heart.
Awesome. Thanks so much for joining us with this week's story
You're
time.
welcome.
Hope you have a wonderful week, everybody. Thanks again.
Bye. Write some poems.